The following is a series of articles on alcohol and alcoholics that will appear, God willing, in the bulletin at Queen of Peace Church sometime. Alcoholics, Type A, Type B. It seems to me there are two types of alcoholic. The first type, Type A, is that man or woman who day after day drinks much too much beer, wine, spirits, etc. Alcohol is a huge problem for them. Everybody around them sees it and knows it. Were you to suggest to them that they have an alcohol problem, that they drink too much, that they are alcoholic, they would well get very angry with you, swear that they do not drink too much, are not alcoholic, and that they can stop drinking anytime they want. The sober alcoholics among us will say they are in denial, and presuming you know a little bit of Egyptian geography, we would say denial is not a river in Egypt. Your angry alcoholic in the meantime, furious with your saying that they are alcoholics, consoles themselves with drinking themselves into oblivion again that very same day. Hungover and guilty on the morning of the next day, they remember the wisdom of the alcoholic spirit, not the Holy Spirit, but the alcoholic spirit that says, give him a hair of the dog that bit him. In other words, give him a drink. This one drink can often get them through that day. They go to work well, and that evening, congratulating themselves for having had a good day at work, they will reward themselves with, you got it, more drink, and falling into bed that night drunk again. If they have a rotten day, they drink. If they have a good day, they drink. They drink that night because they were so good that day by not drinking. All the time your drunk denies that he has an alcohol problem, and it's always somebody else's fault that he does drink, and he can quit any time. A great crisis can occur, like they lose their job, their spouse dies, they run over their grandchild when backing out of the driveway, that swelling on their throat turns out to be cancer, and they quit. They never drink again. You will hear this type of alcoholic at AA meetings say, 20 years ago today I put the plug in the jug and haven't had a drink since. Their problem is alcohol. That's your type A alcoholic. Type B, the second kind of alcoholic. I belong to this type. For us, alcohol is our solution. Strangely enough, not our problem. We look much the same as the type A alcoholic, but we are not. Here's the difference. This morning, for instance, August 30th, 2012, about 8:30 a.m., having sat in front of the Lord for about 1 hour at Sacred Heart Church at Placentia, Newfoundland, out of nowhere, a dark, grey feeling of uselessness came over me. I started picking at the skin of my fingers. Things that people said that hurt me yesterday or last month or years ago started filling my mind, rising up like gas in a sewer. I began lashing out at these people in my mind. I wanted to run away. I wanted to go away. Now, If this was 25 years ago, I would have had poured myself a drink, and within seconds life would be changed. That grey world would be gone, and those people who hurt my feelings yesterday, last week, last month, or last year, to hell with them. Unfortunately, for the type B alcoholic, one drink is too many and 1,000 is not enough. My solution of my taking that one drink becomes my problem now, with me drinking till I pass out. You can see how we are like the type A alcoholic, but we're not. We use alcohol to medicate the pain of living. Type B is on his way to the river to commit suicide, drops in to the local bar to say goodbye to everyone, all his good drinking buddies. However, he has one drink, and within minutes he is happy again, buying drinks for everyone, all thoughts of suicide gone. You might say, so what's wrong with that? Well, it just isn't real. That's what's wrong with it. If somebody doesn't rescue us, our destiny will be death, possibly imprisonment, alcoholic insanity, etc., etc., etc. The end. Second article, alcoholics, type A, type B, continued. Last week in this column you were introduced to two types of alcoholic. Type A, for whom alcohol is a huge problem, and type B, for whom alcohol is their solution to the pain of life. Alcohol, drugs, food, tobacco, poisons, etc., 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 are all good in and of themselves. Everything the Lord has made is good. The book of Ecclesiasticus says this: the Lord brought medicines into existence from the earth, and the sensible man will not despise them. You object, how can poisons be good? They are good in and of themselves, sitting unused on a shelf or in some plant or tree. They may, however, have a very bad or good effect on people who take them, or on animals. Take, for example, rat poison. Its medical name is Coumadin or warfarin. The rat takes it and bleeds to death. I take it properly, and it thins my blood and helps prevent heart failure and me having a stroke. There are millions of people on spaceship Earth who can drink alcohol moderately, and it cheers their heart. The Italians, the Spanish come to mind, not that there aren't Italian and Spanish alcoholics. There are others, however, who are allergic to alcohol and become addicted to it rapidly. One thinks of the American Indian, the Irish, the Poles, the Russians. Not that there aren't men and women in all these ethnic groups who are not alcoholic and can drink moderately. The problem is in ourselves, not in the drug itself. Alcohol is a drug. Alcoholics Anonymous, founded in Akron, Ohio by Bill W. and Dr. Bob in the 1940s or 50s, sets before us the 12 steps of AA that we can take and that will restore us to sanity and sobriety. Step 1 says, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Notice we have to admit two things. One, that we are powerless over alcohol, and 2, that our lives have become unmanageable. Type A alcoholic, for whom alcohol is a huge problem, has a very time admitting anything, especially that they are powerless over alcohol. According to them, they don't have a problem and they can stop drinking any time. Pride reigns supreme in their lives. Type B alcoholic has a very hard time admitting that their lives have become unmanageable. Inclined to grandiosity and depression, they find that alcohol lifts them out of their depression instantaneously and fills them with grandiose thoughts about themselves. As a type B alcoholic, this story from my father, John O'Doherty, describes me very well. Mrs. Crook's public house is at 3 Castle Street, Care, County Tipperary, next door to 2 Castle Street, Care, where we lived. My father, God rest his soul, told me that a big rat lived behind the baseboard in Mrs. Crook's pub. There was also, my father said, a great cask of Guinness Stout, that black beer, that had a leak in it, and it went drip, drip, drip all day and all night. At night, when all the people who drank in Mrs. Crook's pub went home, that scared, frightened, nervous rat came out of his hole behind the baseboard and made his way to the cask of Guinness Stout and lay on his back with his mouth open, catching that black beer that went drip, drip, drip. After some time, drunk as the famous skunk, that rat got to his feet, demanding, "Where is that bloody cat now?" Well, that drunken rat is me, your type B alcoholic. By God's holy grace, I haven't had a drink in 25 years. Life is still unmanageable for me, but alcohol is no longer my solution. I remain sober day by day, one day at a time, by the grace of God and AA. Week 3. Alcoholics type A and type B dash the pain of living. Having classified myself as a type B alcoholic, the type for whom alcohol is a solution to the pain of living, you might ask, what pains? We all have pains, true, but your diseased type B alcoholic uses alcohol initially as medication for his or her pains and eventually becomes hopelessly addicted and dependent like your type A alcoholic. So, to the pain. My father, God rest his soul, died August the 15th, 1962, the feast day of Our Lady's Assumption into Heaven. He came home late at night, like after midnight, 56 or 59 years old. He went into his bedroom and immediately inside the door had a massive heart attack, falling up against the inside of the bedroom door. My mother, God rest her soul, August 23rd, 1994, feast day of St. Rose of Lima, called me, 16 at the time, from my bed, and 'twas me that pushed the door open and eased my father down onto the floor. Within seconds he was dead. Some part of me died too. For the 2 years prior to his death, I barely spoke to my father. I was a hostile, rebellious, moody, introverted, pubescent teenager. Now he was dead, and how does one make peace with a dead man? Being introverted, I couldn't share my grief or pain with anyone. Everything was kept inside, locked down tight. Within 3 weeks, I was sent away from home to a boarding school, which was a minor seminary. I can't explain this next. I was most unhappy in the seminary boarding school, yet I knew I was to be a priest and wanted to be. I missed home. I missed the small town of Care. I missed my mother. I was never to live at home again except during holidays and during sick time. I was available to help my mother in any way I could, and did, but I never shared me with her or anyone. Sometimes I felt she was unavailable, emotionally unavailable. I was guilty about the death of my father and became very secretive. I was expelled from the minor seminary. They never told me why. I know I had told the head priest that he was lying, which he was. I know to this second I did not do what he accused me of, breaking a toilet. The years passed. My interior pains made me a good student. I was in the top 3 of my class, always searching for answers. A year before I was ordained in 1970, something strange happened. I believe a religious experience instigated by the devil. At the time, I was editor-in-chief of Luciat, the college magazine. I was allowed for that reason to visit other students in their rooms during study hours on Luciat business. My seminary body, insofar as I had a body, handed me a book called LSD and You, that's the drug LSD. I opened the book and read only this: the flower children, in other words, drug-using hippies, go on gorgeous trips, all cerise and tangerine, exploding into pale saffron. I closed the book, handed it back, and said to my friend, and said in my mind, I will not rest until I have used every drug there is to be used. The devil at work? I think so. I was going to go on trips away from this hidden torments of mine that were part of my daily bread. Within a year, I was ordained to the priesthood. They put a tattoo, I'm joking, on my shoulder that said, for export. I was assigned to St. Charles Cathedral Parish and Bishop Moore High School in Orlando, Florida. 'Twas 1970, Vietnam, the pill, the sex and drug revolution. Sometime during that first year, I used marijuana for the first time. I was immediately addicted and continued using drugs and alcohol for the next 16 years, until another very violent religious experience delivered me. God willing, later in this series, you will hear about that. Week 4, alcoholics, type A, type B. Last 3 weeks, we have been writing about alcoholics, type A and type B. Again, the type A alcoholic has to admit he is powerless over alcohol, and that alcohol is his problem. And the type B alcoholic has to admit that he is powerless over life itself, and that alcohol is his solution. Both have allergies to alcohol, so excessive drinking becomes a secondary problem for both of them. The 12 steps of AA carry with them the promise that by living these 12 steps in all our affairs, we can live sober and sane lives. Step 2 of AA says, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. To admit that there is a power greater than ourselves is difficult for both types of alcoholic. Remember how grandiose we are. Type A, claiming he can stop drinking any time he likes. He doesn't need any help from anyone. He can do it himself. And besides, what power is there greater than him anyway? Your type B alcoholic could easily acknowledge that there are powers greater than himself, but why would he want their help to stop drinking, since alcohol is the thing that makes life manageable and bearable, he thinks. The pain will have to get really bad before your type B will want any power greater than himself to restore him to sanity. Notice as well that step 2 does not presume that the power greater than us and our disease is God. It says some power greater than ourselves. In my case, the some power greater than myself was I didn't want to end up in the hospital a third time if I started drinking and drugging again. In my previous 2 hospitalizations, I had been put in chemical straitjackets, and for months after I was in anxious anxiety every day. It took months for me to recover from the treatment for my disease. The fear of hospitalization was my higher power for a period and a time. Sometimes one's higher power could be the knowledge that you do not have one more drink left in you, that you will bleed to death internally should you drink again. Some people have God as their higher power and believe that he will restore them to sanity and keep them sober. I was particularly sick in my alcoholic addiction because I didn't want God to help me to be sober. Even though I stopped drinking during previous incarcerations, I didn't want to stop, evidenced by the fact that I returned to drinking and drugging shortly after each hospitalization. So eventually my higher power was the pain and fear that should I drink again, I would be locked up again and might never get out again. On the day of my previous hospitalization, my mother, God rest her soul, when she saw me, told me later that she never thought she would see me again. I had gone so far down into drug and alcohol insanity. Our higher power will supposedly restore us to sanity if we admit we need to be restored to sanity. Then we are admitting that we are insane. Surely we were insane, doing the same behavior time and time again that led us to insanity, and we were expecting a different result from ongoing drug and alcohol use. Now, in my 25th year of sobriety, I know of hundreds of powers greater than myself. Truth to tell, I am powerless over everything, and today the power greater than myself is Jesus the Christ. I can do all things in Christ who strengthens me. Without Christ I can do nothing. Nothing is impossible to Christ. With the help of Christ, I will not drink today. Alcoholics type A and B. Week 5. Remember, please, your type A alcoholic, despite his denials, has a huge problem with alcohol, and your type B alcoholic uses alcohol as the solution to life's many stresses. Preaching, for example, makes me very nervous, so have a drink. Eventually, your type B alcoholic will be preaching and offering the holy sacrifice of the Mass in a state of drunkenness. Step 3 of AA says, made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood Him. So what does all that mean? Basically, you are saying and admitting that you are not able to stop drinking by yourself, and you are asking help from a power greater than yourself to help and make you stop. This step talks about deciding to turn your life and your will over to the care of God as we understood Him. Does anyone understand God at all? One can believe in God, but we may never understand God or grasp who God is. There may well be many who think they know God and may in fact be worshipping a false God. In the letter of James it says that the demons of and in hell believe in God and tremble at the thought. We are hoping that our believing in God and our asking His help with our lives and alcoholism will lead us to sobriety and sanity. But are we praying to the true God? What if your understanding of God is wrong? For instance, a young man or woman in Belfast, Ireland, or in Baghdad, Iraq, believes that God told them to strap a bomb to their bodies and then set it off in the middle of a very crowded store. Does anybody believe that God inspired this mass murder? Does God let Himself be known? We know, for instance, that we humans did not make or create the universe and all that is in it. We know as well that we do not keep the world spinning round, that 'twas not us that made the fishes of the sea and the birds of the air, or the very air that we breathe. We also see that everything has a design to it, and that there is order in the universe. So we conclude that the who made all this, keeps it spinning round, is God. And since everything that exists is good, then God must be good. We can ask for His help to stop drinking and live sanely. This asking God for help must be a daily thing. With your help, Lord God, I will not drink today. You can be sure that your alcoholic who says, I will never drink again, will in fact drink again. He has already forgotten that he is powerless over alcohol and already thinks he himself is God, and by his own power he will never drink again. I haven't had a drink for 25 years, and the most I will say is, Lord, with your help, I will not drink today. Christians in particular have the added blessing of knowing God more truly because of Jesus. No one has ever seen God as He is in Himself, but Jesus, His Son, has made Him known. Whoever sees Jesus sees the Father. Jesus is what God is like. Jesus is God. Having written now for 4 weeks about alcoholics, I must admit that I never did make a decision on my own to turn my life and my will over to the care of Jesus, God as I understood Him. After all, drugs and alcohol, I wrongly believed, made life tolerable. I've seen people panic when it is suggested to them that they give up their daily bread of Xanax. So how did I get clean and sober if I never turned my life over to Christ? Christ the Good Shepherd came after me and rescued me. This, however, will remain for another telling. Week 6. Alcoholics type A, type B, and sobriety. The first 3 steps of AA are like the emergency room at the hospital. They stabilize the critically ill alcoholic or drug addict. Both type A and B alcoholics, perhaps induced by this last brush with death from alcoholic poisoning, finally come to admit that they are powerless over alcohol and over life itself. They have come to believe that some power greater than themselves can restore them to sanity and sobriety. Lying there in critical care, they make a decision to ask the Lord's help to never drink again. For now your alcoholic is saved from a terrible death. For your type B alcoholic, not drinking can be terribly painful, since they are no longer medicating the pain of living with drugs and alcohol. When I stopped drinking and drugging, the pain of life got much worse for a long, long time. All the resentments and hatreds of my life would rise up every day in my mind. The memories of all who had ever done me wrong would rise up like gas out of a sewer. I would see their faces in the sacred host at Mass. I wanted to hurt these people, and now every day I was possessed by temptations to hate and get revenge. I was in agony. It was my daily bread. Now, not using drugs and alcohol had me worse off than when I was using both. So what happened that I stopped using drugs and alcohol since I had never done the first 3 steps of AA? I had a very violent and frightening spiritual awakening. 'Twas in the winter of '87. I was on my way to buy illicit street drugs. I hadn't used for 3 days and was suffering from what we call dope sickness. Your mind and soul are obsessed with drink and drugs. Men and women without money will often prostitute themselves at this stage of their addiction to get drugs and alcohol. We refer to crack whores, etc. Driving towards Melbourne, Florida, and burning up inside, obsessed with acquiring drugs, I heard a voice in my head. It said, "I'm sorry I made you. You're causing scandal. You're scandalizing the drug dealer. 'Twould be better if you were never born. 'Twould be better if a huge millstone were tied around your neck and you be drowned in the depths of the sea. I'm sorry I made you." From that moment to this, I have never used illicit drugs again. Making a U-turn on the highway, I went back to my room. I white-knuckled it. The withdrawal was dreadful. Anxiety, depression, resentments, hatreds were my daily bread. 'Twas during this time that I entered truly into the AA philosophy for the first time. I had ignored and bypassed the first 5 steps of AA during the previous 18 years of my addiction, but now, for what it seemed like the first time, step 6 rose up inside me. Step 6 says, "Became willing to have God remove all these defects of character." To this day, I remember the words in my head, "Be willing to have God remove." Lord, I prayed, I can't get rid of the hatreds, the resentments, the anger, this poison in me. I am giving you permission to remove them. I had finally become willing to have the Lord remove my defects of character. The Lord did. 25 years later, with the grace of God and AA, I am still clean and sober. My religion didn't teach me about AA, but AA taught me about my religion. Without Christ, my higher power, I can do nothing. Week 7. Alcoholics, type A, type B, and sanity. Many sober alcoholics are, in my opinion, quite psychotic. Remember, step 2 says, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. Remember last week how if your alcoholic lives and practices the first 3 steps of AA, he could become sober. So what about becoming sane? The next 9 steps of AA are like therapy, and in my opinion, if they are not practiced, your alcoholic will always remain in a psychotic state and eventually go back to drinking. Of prime importance are steps 4 and 5. Step 4 says, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Many of us in our lifetimes as active alcoholics have done terrible things or have had terrible things done to us. Others have suffered abuse of various kinds as children, and we are terribly wounded inside. To do a searching and fearless moral inventory, we have to examine our whole lives from our childhood up to the present moment. All that's happened in your life, write it down, especially what you are most ashamed of, or what you say you will carry to your grave with you. We are as sick as our secrets. We dance in a ring and suppose, but the secret sits in the middle and knows. Not coming to terms with all our secrets and not acknowledging them before God and another human being will, in my opinion, lead to your falling off the wagon and returning to drinking and perhaps an alcoholic death. If you are afraid to write out your inventory in case somebody finds it, you can write it out in a code known only to yourself. For instance, you could simply write the name Charlie on your inventory, and only you would know if that stood for sexual abuse, etc. by Charlie or not. Step 5 may be the hardest step of all, where you acknowledge before God and another human being the exact nature of your wrongs. Ask your higher power to help you write your inventory and to find someone with whom you can share it. I have listened to a lot of 5th steps which are very similar to someone confessing all they have ever done or hurts they have received to a priest. Again, in my opinion, failure to do steps 4 and 5 will lead you back into alcoholic insanity. We call ourselves Alcoholics Anonymous. We use only our first names at our meetings. Everything we hear at these meetings stays there. What you hear here stays here. Making the 5th step is in some ways like an exorcism. Having acknowledged all we have done, we cannot be tyrannized by our own memories of wrongdoing anymore. Case history. The names have been changed to protect the guilty. Julius was in the hospital for the 9th time, his stomach bleeding inside. I asked him had he ever done his 5th step. He said no. In passing I said, I don't care what you've done, some bestial or incestuous act. You have got to tell someone. As Providence would have it, Julius had in fact done both these things, incest and bestiality. When he got out of the hospital, by God's holy grace, he came to see me and told all. Julius is still alive and sober today, thanks be to God and to AA. Week 8, alcoholics types A and B, more therapy. In our long journey to sobriety and sanity, we come to understand that there are many people we have harmed, and so we need to make amends. So step 8 says, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Notice the step says, we became willing to make amends to them all. To be willing is the great thing. Your alcoholic learns that he or she is not only powerless over alcohol, but over living as well. We recognize that even to make amends to those we have harmed, we need the grace of God. One could well be a timid, cowardly man or woman, so humanly speaking, we may not be able to make amends, yet our higher power, if asked, can and will strengthen us to make amends. Remember David in the power of the Lord going up against the giant Goliath and defeating him. Step 9 says that we may direct amends whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. You may have stolen a great deal of money, but the persons you stole it from are all dead. You can make amends by giving an equivalent amount to charity. Also, if your making amends would harm another, you would forego making amends. For instance, you have been unfaithful to your spouse with someone else's spouse. It would not be right to tell your spouse that you had been unfaithful, or to tell the spouse of the person you were unfaithful with about your act of adultery with their spouse. Recently, a couple in AA that I know were planning to be married. Both of them had been sexually involved with other people, between them a total of 9 others. Individually, they asked me should they tell one another about their previous relationships. I encouraged both of them not to. They would injure one another by doing so, and 9 other people would be sharing their marriage bed in some way. Sometimes you must just carry your own cross, the guilt and pain of your past sins. Step 10 says, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. While 'tis hard because of our pride to admit we are wrong and promptly to admit it, not to do so is dangerous for us. This could easily lead us back to drinking again. Step 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him. For about 23 years now, I spend one of my first hours each day before Christ in the Blessed Sacrament in some form of prayer. Prayer and meditation can be difficult at first. I would recommend the recitation of a Jesus prayer. On each bead of a rosary or on your fingers, you could say over and over again, Jesus, I love you, possess me. Jesus, I love you, possess me. Jesus, I love you, possess me. Or you could say, Jesus, I love you, possess us. Paying attention to what you are asking Jesus, who knows all about you, to possess you. Best to be possessed by Christ rather than by drugs, alcohol, resentments, etc., etc. Prayer becomes our daily bread. Week 11, alcoholics, type A and B, plus step 12. Step 12 says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry the message of AA to other suffering, addicted alcoholics. For the past 7 weeks in this column, with God's help, I have been doing precisely that. carrying the message of AA to others who suffer from this disease of alcoholism, and to others who are not diseased as such, that you might understand. We alcoholics generally make the people who live around us sick in some way. You are often drawn into our disease as enablers or codependents. There is a 12-step support group for you called Al-Anon. It's for anyone who has a child, a spouse, a friend, a parent, a relative who is an alcoholic. Al-Anon will help you with living with their disease, and more importantly, what to do and not do for them. It will show you that their disease is not your fault. When we talk about having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we raise the question, what is a spiritual awakening? A spiritual awakening has many forms. One of my siblings was, in my opinion, one of the most self-centered persons I'd ever known. It takes one to know one, says I. Yet, when his first child was born, I was amazed at how he was transfigured. When he talked about his child and about changing his child's diaper in the middle of the night, more than once a night, he sounded like a man who had gone on a pilgrimage to a holy place. He was spiritually awake. Many things can bring us to a spiritual awakening. The birth of a child, its death, sickness, marriage, becoming a parish priest, going to war, becoming an alcoholic, being fired at, etc., etc. The greatest of all spiritual awakenings for me came through my utter defeat at the hands of alcohol and drugs. Looking back, it's easier to say what it is. I was in Elmira, New York at the time, at Mount Saviour's Monastery. I had been clean and sober for some years. Bear in mind, please, I'm still an alcoholic addict. One drink or drug will reactivate my disease. It's like on the day you first stop drinking, you get the monkey off your back and put him over in the corner of your room. Year after year, cunning, baffling, and patient, your monkey is becoming a gorilla. You take that one drink, 10, 20, 30 years later, etc., you reactivate your disease. You no longer have a monkey on your back, but a 1,000-pound gorilla. So what's the spiritual awakening? I had overdone cutting the grass in the hot sun at the monastery. Something went terribly wrong. My heart began jumping in my chest. I wasn't afraid or anything, but I did know it was serious and I might die. I sat in the large chair in my room, very conscious of my erratic heartbeat. I picked up the large legal pad from the floor and wrote from the top middle of the page to the bottom the word nothing in inch-high letters. Then from the middle left of the page, I wrote again in inch-high letters the letters N-O-T, catching up the H letter from the top nothing word and finishing it off with I-N-G. I had a perfect nothing cross, and immediately in my mind the words, without me you can do nothing, and nothing is impossible to God. At the moment, thank God, I am spiritually awake. If you realize that without God you cannot finish reading this, you are spiritually awake. Without Christ you can do nothing. Nothing is impossible to God. I hope this journey through the 12 steps of AA and my own confessions of addiction and alcoholism will be helpful to you.